Welcome back to Crime Pod. This episode is going to be about Herman Mudgett. Who the hell is Herman Mudgett, I hear you scream? Herman Mudgett has the alias of H.H. Holmes. Herman W. Mudgett was born in Gilmantown, New Hampshire, on the 16th of May 1860, but spent his boyhood days on a farm near Burlington, Vermont. He was extremely bright, ambitious and studious, and at the age of 16 he became a school teacher. On the 4th of July 1878, at the age of 18, he married Clara A. Lovering at Alton, New Hampshire, and about this time he gave up his position as a school teacher to enable him to take a course in medical school at Burlington, Vermont. A year later he finished his course at this school and then went on to Ann Arbor College, Michigan, to complete his education. In 1881, Mudgett gained possession of a body that bore a remarkable resemblance to a fellow student who was his closest friend and who had taken out a life insurance policy for $1,000 a short time previously, in which Mudgett was named as beneficiary. This put an idea into the heads of the two students. They surreptitiously placed this body into the bed of Mudgett's friend, who immediately disappeared. There was evidently little or no investigation made regarding the case, as Mudgett collected the insurance without trouble and presumably divided it with his dead chum. Shortly after this, Mudgett left college and, under the name of Holmes, procured a position at an insane asylum in Norristown, Pennsylvania. After 6 months, he left this position and proceeded to Philadelphia, where he procured employment as a drug clerk. He next went to Chicago, where he opened a drugstore of his own. Continuing to use the name of Holmes, he married Miss Myrta Belknap in Chicago on the 28th of January 1887, thus committing bigamy. On the 17th of January 1894, under the name of Howard, he again married in Denver Miss Georgie Yoke of St. Louis. Before marrying Miss Yoke, Holmes travelled about the country under numerous assumed names, engaging in various enterprises, none of which would bear investigation. He accumulated considerable money and constructed a 4-story building at the corner of 63rd and Wallace Streets in Chicago, which was known as Holmes Castle. About 1889, Holmes met Benjamin F. Petizel in Chicago, who was afterwards suspected of being Holmes's partner in many crimes. At that time, Petizel's family, consisting of a wife and 4 small children, named Desi, Alice, Nellie and Howard, lived in St. Louis. Holmes was a man of medium height and build. He was immaculate in appearance, suave in manners, and, as this narrative will show, fiendish in disposition. Petizel was a mesmeric subject, and Holmes, being possessed of hypnotic powers, discovered this fact, and thereafter Petizel was so much clay in his hands. On November the 9th, 1893, Petizel took out a $10,000 life insurance policy from the Fidelity Mutual Life Association of Philadelphia, which was made payable to his wife. Holmes, knowing this, suggested to Petizel and his wife that Petizel go to Philadelphia and, under the assumed name of B.F. Perry, open up an office and put up a sign, "Patents bought and sold." Holmes stated that he would then institute a search among hospitals or medical colleges and find a body having features and a physique similar to Petizel. The body would be surreptitiously placed in the establishment and laid in such a position as to clearly indicate that death had resulted from an accidental explosion, that no questions would be asked. Petizel would disappear, and Mrs. Petizel's 14-year-old daughter Alice would journey to Philadelphia and identify the remains as those of her father. The insurance money would be paid without question, and then Petizel would quietly return to his family. Mrs. Petizel offered strenuous objections to the plan, but Holmes commanded Petizel to do his bidding, and the result was that on August 17, 1894, Petizel opened his office at 1316 Callow Hill Street and put out his sign as directed. On June 15, 1894, while Holmes, then known as Howard, was in St. Louis arranging details for his latest scheme, he purchased a drugstore, upon which he gave a mortgage. Shortly afterward, he sold this mortgaged property, and on July the 19th he was arrested on a charge of obtaining money by false pretences in connection with this sale. While in jail, he met Marion Hedgepeth, who, with 3 others, robbed a train near St. Louis in 1891 and was captured in San Francisco. Holmes asked Hedgepeth if he knew of any slick lawyer. The train robber recommended him to J.D. Howe of St. Louis, and Holmes then foolishly unfolded his whole scheme in regard to Petizel to Hedgepeth and told him that he would give him $500 for his services if the plan worked. On July the 31st, Holmes was released on bail, furnished by his third wife. A few days after being released, he proceeded to Philadelphia, where he met Petizel, alias Perry, and on August the 17th, the day on which the latter opened his office in Callow Hill Street, Holmes accompanied him to the second-hand furniture store located at 1037 Buttonwood Street and assisted him in selecting furniture. On August the 22nd, a carpenter named Eugene Smith, who was of an inventive turn of mind, passed this office and, being attracted by the sign, stepped in to discuss the merits of a set saw he had invented and desired to put on the market. Perry listened attentively to his description of the invention and asked him to bring a model the next day. Smith complied with the request, and after an examination of it, Perry predicted heavy sales. On Monday, September the 3rd, Smith called to ascertain how his device was selling. Perry was not in the office, but his hat and coat were there, and Smith, believing he'd stepped out for a few moments, waited until he became impatient and left. He returned the next day and again saw no one, but observed that the coat and hat were still in the same position. He then made an inquiry in the neighbourhood and learned that Perry had not been seen since Saturday. His suspicions being aroused, he decided to investigate. As Perry occupied both floors of the small 2-story building, Smith proceeded upstairs, and in a back room he found the mutilated body of Perry. The breast and side of the face were badly burned. Fragments of a large bottle were found near the corpse, and a tobacco pipe and burned match were also found. The body was removed to the morgue, and after lying there until September the 13th, without being claimed, it was buried in the Potter's Field. On September the 19th, attorney Howe called on Mrs. Petizel in St. Louis and informed her that her husband was dead, and requested that the 14-year-old daughter, Alice, accompany him to Philadelphia for the purpose of identifying the remains. Mrs. Petizel then signed a paper prepared by Howe, which gave him power of attorney to collect the money, and he left with Alice, Mrs. Petizel believing that the child would be instructed to identify the body of a stranger and that her husband was alive and well. On September the 21st, Howe, Alice, Holmes and Smith, who discovered the body, called at the Philadelphia office of the insurance company, and after Smith was interrogated, the party proceeded with the insurance officials to disinter the remains. Holmes explained that he was a close friend of the Petizel family and knew that Petizel was located at 1316 Callow Hill Street under the assumed name of Perry because of financial troubles in Fort Worth. When the body was exposed, Alice Petizel and Holmes immediately identified the remains as those of Petizel. While the cause of Petizel's death was not perfectly clear to the insurance officials, they concluded that the large bottle, which was found broken by his side, contained some inflammable substance which exploded as the victim was evidently in the act of lighting his pipe. Against this theory, it was argued that the body reclined in a peaceful attitude, and the stomach, when opened, gave forth a distinct odour of chloroform. At any rate, the insurance money was paid to Howe, who proceeded to St. Louis and paid Mrs. Petizel the $10,000, less $2,800 deducted for expenses. As Alice did not accompany Howe, Mrs. Petizel anxiously inquired as to her whereabouts, but the attorney assured her that Holmes would see she was well provided for. A few days after this, Holmes visited Mrs. Petizel, who begged piteously to be taken forthwith to her husband and child.